Hey everyone, so this is Harrow, Season 3, Episode 8, titled Alea Iacta Est, meaning the die has been cast. So, it's a short little snippet of these two guys, doing this 18th, 19th century fake duel, or I assume one, because I doubt that they're going to be doing a autopsy on a guy who's like 200 or 300 years old. So, um, anyways, both of them, or at least one of them, ends up dead. For real, not just like fake for real or whatever. So, anyway, so it goes back to Tanya and Harrow on his boat, and Tanya's telling Harrow, I have cancer, or my cancer's in remission, um, and I changed my last name to my grandmother's maiden name. Um, and she explains that if he had tried to change her mind, she would have come back to be with him, essentially, because I guess um, he left, and she wasn't putting up a fight or whatever, and I whatever. Anyway, so just to continue with this whole Tanya, Harrow, James situation. Um, James is telling Fern, at the bar or restaurant that she tracked him down at, that he didn't steal any money and he thinks Max did it. Same old story. He's like, well, I think because I think Max did it, and Milo thinks I did it, she will most likely kill me because of it. So, um, Nichols finds out the next day or the next morning that, or no, before that, Harrow explains to Tanya the situation, and that since James has told him Tanya was dead, he's not sure if he can believe anything James has said to him, and so thus can't really be sure he wasn't involved in Max's death. Then the next morning, Nichols finds out that Tanya is in Australia. And Harrow and Tanya are about to go see James when Harrow realizes, the police are trying to follow him. So they can't exactly, um, you know, they can't exactly go see James, even though technically Harrow knows where he is. So with him before, Harrow starts the case of the week. Nichols and him argue about Tanya and how he didn't tell her or tell him, how Harold didn't tell Nichols about Tanya being there for the entire night um, and all that stuff. Um, so later on in the episode, I don't remember, the days kind of get jumbled up here where they don't really tell you how much time has passed. So you assume only like a few hours or a day has passed or whatever. So I think it's been like a day or two where Harold finds out that Tanya was called into police headquarters. So he goes over there, and Tanya's in the middle of explaining things to Nichols. So she's like, well, James told me that he was going to the University of Adelaide for school. When she got a phone call about overdue fees. So she calls the university wanting to know what the hell is going on. And she learns he didn't even attend one damn class. So she put her ass on a plane, came to Australia to talk to Harrow. And so she ends up lying, saying, well, Harrow doesn't know where James is. He hasn't had any contact with him. So apparently Nichols buys the shit. So he lets their asses go. Um, So during the case, like at the end of the case of the week, well, I'll say that for later. So James ends up convincing Fern to log into Harrow's accounts, work account at Quiffum on their computer, on his computer, and later on, Callan finds James reading Harrow's emails when James tells him to just, fuck off, apparently, essentially. So he snoops, this account snoops through James's room, finds his key card to a business, and the name on the card says John Rand. So the next day, after finding this, Callan goes to the building with the company initials on it, uses the key card to get inside, and finds people are claiming, or what I assume to be claiming, as helping people remotely fix their computers with whatever the issue is. But what they're actually doing is stealing personal information like bank card numbers and personal information and stuff like that. Um, so Mila Zorich gets a phone call shortly after Callan leaves and finds out he was there because she installed security cameras. So that's kind of in a nutshell what happens with the whole James um, Max Zorich case, long-term case. So the case of the week, both of the fake duelers from the very first scene of this episode are actually book dead, and their names are Martin Peake and George Elich. So autopsy doesn't really, give them much outside of, both were in fairly good shape, and you know, Martin Peake had restless leg syndrome, and the bullets inside both men have the name Ruffian on it. So, turns out, they were into this card game called Pharaoh, which is like a 18th, 19th century card game, or a very ancient game that precedes like poker or something like that. And so there's this Brisbane Pharaoh Society where they both played the game at. So Harrow goes to that society and sees Nichols there questioning two women named Emmeline Millis and Karen Yancey, and they're explaining, they're in the middle of a championship tournament for this particular game, and both Peake and Elich were, I think were in the championship and championship game, and during the last game, Peake and Elich were fighting over where the winner would receive the time capsule. Specifically, Peake was like, he said something about how he found the Elich's wife attractive, and so they decided to have this duel and all this stuff. And so Dugald Hogarth was their referee for this duel, and he ends up going missing. So Harrow and Nichols go speak to Martin's widow, where Martin had the only key to the safe where the guns used for the duel were kept. Um, in that safe, they find 11 bullets with the name, uh, the name Ruffian on it. So that's where the bullets came from. Um, they eventually find Hogarth, who says he was afraid of seeing two of his competitors die in front of him, and he has an airtight alibi and all that. So he's out of the picture. Um, oh, I forgot to mention, Tanya and Harrow both confront um, James after Vern logs into Harrow's account at Clifton, or on the Clifton website. Um, and he doesn't really say much other than how he felt like she didn't tell him anything about or he's upset about the fact that she didn't tell him Harold's name and all that stuff. So um, as Harold's trying to finish an autopsy of Martin Peake, Renee comes in and says, um, and he realizes, there was darkroom developer on his hands. So he goes back to the Feral Society, um, finds out Emmeline actually develops film at the society, and she found negatives of what was in the time capsule that was buried 50 years before. Um, and there's one frame missing, so he knows that on that frame that there will be whatever it is that was put inside. So um, before he leaves, Emmeline kisses his cheek. He rushes back to Clifton to try to get a sample of it, but um, the next day, Harold explains to Nichols, well, he can't prove that Emmeline was 100% the person who kissed Peake's cheek the day before, or the day of the duel. He believes the faded lipstick that was on his cheek was hers, plus there was the darkroom developer on his hands. So he's like, I feel like she found something valuable in the missing frame or the negatives when the capsule was buried, and um, that's why she killed him. So Harrow convinces Nichols to dress up in his 18th century clothes to go to the Sparrow Championship to play. And during the game, Nichols and Hogarth are actually drugged with a drink that Emmeline gives them. So it's up to Harrow to win. So he ends up winning, confronts Emmeline, um, but she's like, well, all I wanted were the antique cards. Um, Karen Yancey was the one who wanted everything else. So he goes back inside after following Emmeline and confronts Yancey by uh, when he realizes that there was an envelope on the in the photograph that was taken that had a stamp on it that was a stamp of a plate 77 penny red, and apparently it's worth over $500,000. So because she was eliminated early in the competition, um, she convinced Emmeline to go in to get in after she killed Peaks and Illich. Because she knew what medication he was on, which made him more um, what's the word, more flirtatious, I guess. Um, she flirts with him um, to get him down to the dark room, lifts his keys, and swaps the blanks out with real bullets. Um, so Yancey's trying to kill Harrow by fencing him to death or whatever, but Nichols eventually stops her. So before Nichols is taken into the ambulance, he's like, I'm glad um, you know, you were telling the truth about um, your son, you not knowing where your son was, because if you're lying about it, then I would have to go back and look into all the things that were strange that went on around you, like the death of Quinn, um, and the death of Francis Chester, um, and he didn't want to see Harrow taken away in cuffs, but he still feels like James will have to be taken away in cuffs. So um, that's essentially the case of the week and the long-term case. So next time on Harrow, Callan, seems to be telling Harrow what he saw, and for Harrow to just cut, James off, because clearly the dude is playing you. But Harrow's like, I can't. He's my son. So James gets Fern into breaking into the police station, stealing the phone, and all that jazz. So, and the case of the week is where a man finds out that his girlfriend may have slept with another man, possibly her boss, and he may have killed them both. So, um, I'm starting to think that, um, I'm starting to think that, that, Mila, or not Mila, I'm starting to think that, Tanya and Harold didn't actually have a son. They didn't even have a child at all. Um, they didn't have a child or anything like that. Um, she, what she's doing is she's in league with this James dude to swindle Mila out of all of her money, and so they're just friends. They just acquaintances. They just know each other. Perhaps maybe they're even lovers, and they've been at this for several years now, and now they're trying to get Harrow to get in on this whole thing, um, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, um, and so they're trying to get him on it, and he's oblivious to it because he has a soft spot for Tanya, because that was his first love, and Harold's just trying to um, Harold's just trying to um, you know believe that this is his son, and yada yada yada, and it's just, yeah. So um, like I said, this I don't think that um, Tanya and him actually had a son. I didn't think that she was initially going to be in on it, but now it seems like maybe she is, because why is James working at this company if he didn't steal any money? Um, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Why is he? Because he has that card for a reason, and the only reason I can think of is because he actually works there, works for Tanya, and the reason why he's working for Tanya is because, or not Tanya, Mila. The reason why he's working for Mila is because Tanya and him made up this plan to swindle her out of all this money, and and Max, ends up finding out, tries to blackmail them, and he ends up killing him, because James ends up killing Max, because the money was intended for him and um, him and Tanya to live off of. So, and so obviously now they're gonna have to get Harrow to help them or whatever, and it's just, yeah, just a whole mess. So, um, that's what I think so far of, what's going on, and until next time.